In November 29, 2005, Michelle Michael, a pediatric nurse in Ruby Memorial Hospital, in Morgantown, West Virginia, was making her rounds when she received a call saying her house was on fire. Immediately she rushed out over to her house, but on arriving there was nothing she could do. The house was already engulfed in flames. Knowing that her sons were safe in school, Shelley began to worry about her husband, Jimmy Michael. Early on, when she left for work, Jimmy was asleep, and now he's not answering the telephone. Not very long after, firefighters sent a message to police, letting them know there was a victim inside the house. The body was unrecognizable, but knowing that Michael's car was still in the garage, there were no doubts. The victim was Shelley's husband. But why didn't he wake up with the fire detectors or with the fire itself? His remains were found in his bed, and that didn't make much sense to investigators. Michelle's behavior at the scene also wasn't the expected in this kind of situations. Just walking around as nothing happened. No emotion at all, said Fire Marshal Ken Tennant. The next day the autopsy report shows that Jimmy had no smoke inhalation in his lungs, meaning he was already dead when the fire started. If the fire didn't kill him, what did? To investigators, this could only mean that the fire was set to cover up an homicide. But who would want to kill Jimmy? Rumors began to roll that Michelle, Shelley, was somehow involved. People were saying to police to look at the wife because she was a nurse and so, had access to drugs. The toxicology report about Jimmy's death will take some weeks to be ready. Meanwhile, police began to interview those who could have access to the house, to know their alibis for the time the fire must have started. Police discovers that Shelley was having an affair with a man named Bobby Teets, who worked for her husband. Having checked Shelley's lover's alibi, detectives brought Michelle to an interview at Morgantown Police Station. First, when asked about the affair, she denies everything.
Have you ever had an affair with him? Why would Bobby say they could do it?
She said in the morning of the accident she went to work. Jimmy was asleep. She began her normal routine at the hospital, and stayed there all morning until she received the call saying her house was on fire. But having already seen footage of the hospital surveillance cameras, police knows that is not true. Shelley is captured on video leaving the hospital premises at 8:11, and returning at 8:28. Her car was also captured on camera leaving and returning the hospital. Worse yet for Michelle's alibi, was the fact that a neighbor was positive he had seen her pull out of her driveway, at 8:20. But, despite the undeniable evidence, Shelley had the audacity to refute all that detectives were showing to her.
Don't lie. We got your car leaving the hospital grounds.
I didn't leave the hospital grounds.
Did you go home?
I didn't go home.
That's something that we can't explain away. We got your car leaving the hospital grounds.
I didn't leave the hospital grounds either.
Being cornered by detectives, she gave her own theory how the fire might have begun. In Shelley's idea, the clothes iron found at the foot of the bed, may have been left connected and having overheated, caught fire to the sheets. To police, that was out of the question. They had examined the iron and come to the conclusion that was not possible. Investigators have now no doubt that Michelle was hiding something. The period of time that she was out of the hospital, was enough to allow her to go to her house, set the bed on fire and return to work. Shelley lived only 5 minutes away from work, so it was possible that in the 17 minutes period of time she was gone, she could start the fire. The puzzling to police was that the fire was reported about 10 a.m. If Shelley indeed set the house on fire, how come the fire only erupted 1.5 hours later? Investigators asked the help of special agents from ATF, to uncover the mystery. They built a full-scale replica of the bedroom, exactly as the one where Jimmy died, to set it on fire and try to understand why the fire took so long to ignite. The results from those tests will take months to come. On the 26th of February 2006, the toxicology report about Jimmy's death arrived. It revealed that he was overdosed with a drug called rocuronium. Rocuronium is a muscle relaxant used in modern anesthesia to some surgeries. The patient must be connected to a ventilator, or else he will suffocate. If it was given to Jimmy, he must have had a horrific death. With rocuronium you can see what's happening to you, but you can't move. Of course Michelle had access to this drug, and could easily give an injection in her husband while he was asleep. Police thought they had enough to charge Shelley. On the 10th of March 2006, Michelle Michael was arrested for arson and first-degree murder of her husband. She could spend the rest of her life in prison. On the 9th of July 2007, Michelle Michael went to court at Canoe County, West Virginia. A nurse, accused of killing her husband and set fire to the house, was unusual. People could not believe it. Despite facing life in prison without parole, Shelley was everything but worried, having the newspaper cover, showing a certain arrogance. People wanted more of this story. Without direct evidence, the prosecution made his point mainly on the fact that Jimmy was killed by a drug that Michelle had easy access, in order for her to claim a $500,000 of a life insurance policy Jimmy owned. The defense retaliated, saying it was impossible to Michelle to have set the house on fire, based on the fact that when the fire began she was in the hospital. There was a gaping time that has to be explained, or there is no case, but for investigators there was no mystery. After those tests made by ATF, investigator Ken Tennant explained that, fire must have oxygen to burn. Because the doors were closed, the fire remained restricted to the room, until the flames opened a hole in the floor that made the fire spread. In a bold move, Michelle took the stand to give jurors her side of the story. When asked why she had lied so much, in relation to the affair for example, she said,
I was ashamed of myself. I just cheated on my husband and everybody was already in so much pain.
Has she managed to convince the jury? On the 21st of July, after 3 days of deliberation, the judge read the verdict.
Michelle Michael, guilty.
Although the jury recommended mercy, the judge imposed a life sentence with parole after 15 years. In relation to the arson charges, Michelle was sentenced to 20 years. The sentences must be served one after the other. Days later, Shelley spoke to Jimmy's parents.
You guys, I did not take Jimmy's life. I swear to you. I don't know what happened. I wish I did.
And so it ended the saga of a crime that should never have happened. Now, Michelle Michael, a nurse who had it all, must have another saga. She's serving her sentence at Lacken Correctional Center, West Virginia.